Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of Capitol Preview, a show sponsored by Mediacom that talks to our senators and House members on issues important in the legislature today. Our guest this morning is Senator Pam Jochum, Democrat from Dubuque and Assistant Leader in the Senate. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Bill. Glad to be here.
Very good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey, I'm just going to kind of jump into this. We got some pretty good topics to talk about this morning, and one of the things that has been very prevalent on the docket up there at the legislature is medical cannabis. And so if you could kind of go through to our viewers a little bit and kind of explain what's going on.
Yeah, you bet. So medical cannabis was an issue that actually started probably 5 or 6 years ago already in the Senate. Senator Joe Bolcom was the first one to really kind of start pushing that whole notion that cannabis really was a way to treat a lot of illnesses much more effectively than some of the prescription drugs that are even out there, especially for people with epilepsy, for example. And I remember I sat in one committee meeting with moms there who brought their babies with them who had a seizure disorder. And some of those babies were seizuring during our committee meeting. They went to Colorado, who had already approved medical cannabis, and within 6 months those babies were pretty much seizure-free and beginning to develop normally, developmentally. Those kids were having so many seizures that they were developmentally delayed. So we went engaged in that, start moving some of those notions through. Sometimes you got to plant seeds, and that's what we did. And so last year we actually did pass another bill that would have added additional diseases and medical problems to the list that was available or eligible for medical cannabis. All kinds of safeguards built in to that whole legislation, and actually allow the THC level to get a little higher depending on what the illness was. And then the governor turned around and vetoed the bill even though it had strong bipartisan support. The commitment was that both chambers, leaders in both chambers and the governor would work through this interim to reach agreement. And I know a bill did come out of a House committee. The governor apparently has given the nod that it's a bill she could support and would enact into law. So it's a little more positive this year. And hopefully it will pass, and a lot of our veterans are suffering from post-traumatic stress, and children with epilepsy, people going through cancer treatment, they will all be able to access this medication.
Well, I appreciate you and your colleagues sticking with it, because it has been a long process.
Well, and I had a daughter who passed, a little over a year ago, and she had a seizure disorder. Excuse me, and I know I was prepared to, and I had talked to Sarah's neurologist too about transitioning off of some of the seizure meds to trying cannabis, because the seizure meds have so many other side effects. We had to check Sarah's liver regularly to make sure it wasn't damaging the liver, and anyway, cannabis doesn't have all those side effects. So there's a lot of positives to it.
Well, and it's good that we have somebody that has the experience that you've gone through that is help leading the charge on this. So.
And I had a sister who died about a year ago, and she had multiple sclerosis. And she too would have benefited a great deal.
That could have happened.
Yeah, with the spasticity in the muscles and
good luck.
Those issues.
Hopefully
so
this
hopefully
year
it'll
will
happen
be the
this
year.
You bet.
I know another thing that's been kind of hot in the discussion among the legislators and into the community has been the manufactured housing.
Oh, yes.
The bill that was proposed last week and then taken out of the committee. So
the media here in the Des Moines area really put the spotlight on the Waukee mobile home park, and that really alerted all of us to some real problems that were occurring in the state that were kind of under the radar at that point. And what was going on was that we have several out-of-state corporations, one that headquartered in Colorado, and they're now coming into Iowa and purchasing mobile home parks. And to my knowledge, they've purchased about 14 of them so far. And one of those is in my own community now, Table Mound Mobile Home Park. And what they are doing is they're coming in, they're not making any improvements to the mobile home park itself, but they're doubling the lot rent. They're now installing these water meters that don't work. Actually, I've had constituents who said one person living in the mobile home, and they got a $1,500 water bill for 1 month. And in the past, that lot rent, the water was included in that lot rent. Not anymore. They're separate. So they double the lot rent, so they're paying over $400 a month in lot rent, and now this huge utility bill on top of it. Wow. So we've had public hearings and did a lot of work during the interim, and worked with the Attorney General's office and Iowa Legal Aid, who has actually represented a lot of mobile home park tenants for a long time. What we've also found is that the Landlord-Tenant Act that governs mobile home parks is very different than the Tenant-Landlord Act that governs people who live in apartment buildings. They're night and day, and people who live in apartments have far more rights than those who live in a mobile home park. So we introduced bills in both chambers. In the Senate, Senator Zach Walz from Iowa City, Coralville, actually was the lead on all of this. And we had 30 sponsors. There's 50 senators. 30 signed on to this bill. And in the House, I think they had maybe 18 sponsors, both parties. And they were told last week, the leaders of the House and the Senate killed the bill. They came out of subcommittee, and that was it. So what we're trying to do is resurrect some protections. Last year, the Senate did pass a bill to provide some protections, just cause and a notification that if they're going to raise the rent, the lot rent, they had to give them far more notice time-wise that rent increase was coming. And it went over to the House, and it's been sitting in the Judiciary Committee since. So that's actually what we call funnel-proof, because it's passed one chamber already, and is still eligible. So we're hoping we can resurrect that bill and maybe amend it to provide a few more additional protections for Iowans living in these mobile home parks.
And then what do you think will happen with it next year then? Will you try and
Yes, we will. We are not going to give up on that, because we really need to provide some real strong protections for people and create a better balance between landlords and tenants in mobile home parks. And quite frankly, hold these out-of-state corporations accountable. Because they are not being held accountable right now.
Well, good for you guys. Funding for schools, that's always a big part of the legislature. It's always your biggest discussion item, it seems like.
It is.
And the governor has some, you said the governor has some new, maybe attitudes. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, I think they're getting closer to an agreement. So, and the reason why it's so important is that at least some of us still believe strongly that one of the most important investments that we can make as state government is investing in our children and adults to make sure that they have the knowledge and the skills they need to be successful at life. So to me, that's one of the best investments we can make is in our people. And because of the education budget, that's pre-K through 12th grade, that alone eats up probably about 48% of our state budget. We've always had a very strong commitment in this state to public education. So the Senate passed one bill that was at 2.1% increase for funding for the school year that starts next fall. And the House had a bill that was at 2.5%. The governor asked for 2.5%. Two different chambers, both controlled by the same party, different numbers. So they've been negotiating, and my understanding is that the governor has said as long as it's close to a $100 million increase, she's good. It's about a $20 million difference between the House and the Senate. So hopefully they've worked out those differences, and we will actually see
when
something
do you think those will be worked? Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Well, the funding for education actually ends up in our standings appropriations bill, which is the very last bill we do of the year. But here's the issue. A lot of the school districts, in the past we used to provide the funding for our public school system about 18 months in advance to give school districts enough time to budget and to know how many teachers they can have and what size of classrooms are going to be and all that sort of thing. The Republicans changed all that, and they said, oh, we're not going to do 18 months in advance anymore. We're going to provide the funding this spring for the school year that starts next fall.
Okay.
Well, the school districts have to certify their budget in April.
Okay.
So they need to know how much money is available to educate our children starting next fall. So it's pretty critical we get it done and get it done soon.
Good. All right, thank you. I know we just got done with Funnel Week, or you guys just got done with Funnel
Nightmare Week.
Nightmare Week last Friday. So you might want to kind of educate the viewers a little
Sure.
bit of what Funnel was, and that the legislature is due to adjourn on April 21st, and kind of where we're at with that.
So that's the 100th day of the session.
Yeah.
And that's what timetables we put on ourselves. And that's in order to try and bring focus to bills on what actually deserve the attention of the legislative body. So coming out of the committees, starting in January, we start having committee hearings. And you might get 500 bills that get reported out of the committees between the House and the Senate. Well, we're not going to pass 500 bills and turn them into law.
Right.
So what happens then is that you have a week where you say, any bill that isn't out of committee by last Friday is not even eligible for consideration by the House or the Senate for the rest of this legislative session. So now we've got a list of bills that made it out of the committees. So starting today, the House and Senate pretty much go into full-time debate, because the next final deadline is March 20th. And that means that a bill has to be passed out of the Senate that came out of our committee, in the House, sent over to the House, it has to come out of a House committee. And it's all got to happen by March 20th, and vice versa. The House debates only the bills that came out of their committees in the last 6 weeks. They got to pass their chamber over to the Senate. We got to bring them out of our committee in the Senate. And if they fail to do that, they're dead.
On the
They're
second one.
they're not
Yeah.
going to be eligible for debate for the rest of the session, and they're
Okay.
just dead bills. So.
That's interesting. And I think it's a good,
Well, it's self-imposed, and it's a way to make
Absolutely.
sure that we are staying focused and,
right.
yes.
Yep.
So it's a good idea.
Quickly, I'm going to run over the land bank explanation.
Oh, sure.
And we got about a minute.
Oh, okay, great. So this is really a tool that cities and counties really were looking for. And the idea is to help them provide one more tool at the local level to create more affordable housing for people. And so this allows a land bank, which is a public agency. So cities and counties got to pass ordinances and resolutions to get there. It's a public agency, and they in turn can acquire dilapidated and neglected buildings. They can ask for back taxes to be forgiven, because many times that's what's stopping that piece of property from being developed, because there's liens against it and back taxes. So this is a way to be able to take care of those issues, move those dilapidated, neglected buildings, get them renovated, get them back into use in the community to meet some very unmet needs, like affordable housing, like business fronts for entrepreneurs that want to start a business.
Okay.
So it did come out of committee in the Senate, and it will most likely be sent to the Ways and Means Committee, which is a tax committee, because there are some fees built into the bill. But yeah, it's still a live round, and cities and counties and our council of governments really wanted that legislation.
Well, very good. Well, I know we've kind of gone through a bunch of very significant things in a short amount of time, but I appreciate your
you're
insight. You're very versed on what's going on up there. So I appreciate that. Again, our guest this morning was Senator Pam Jochum, Democrat from Dubuque, also the assistant leader in the Senate. So again, thanks very much, Senator,
you're welcome.
for
My pleasure.
taking your time out and visiting with us this morning.
It's great. Thank you.
Stay tuned for another episode of Capitol Preview.